My mom ran away after I was born because I came out with drugs in my system. I've tried to look her up since then, but I think she probably died under a bridge somewhere. I can't say I'd feel too bad if she did. Grandma always said her biggest fear was Mom coming back and trying to take me. My dad's parents took me in. It was supposed to be just until Dad got clean, but he overdosed on fentanyl first. He didn't even do fentanyl, Grandma told me. Somebody mixed it in with the crap he bought on the street. I can't say I feel too bad about that either. He was supposed to be getting clean to raise me. Maybe I would feel sorry for my parents if I had known them. Maybe they were good people who made bad choices when they were too young to know better. But since all I know about them is the drug stuff, that's my whole concept of them. My therapist did one of those word association exercises with me recently. He only gave me 1 second to respond with the first word or phrase that came to mind. He said, "Mom," and I immediately answered, "Junkie." He said, "Dad," and I immediately answered, "OD." I'm only telling you this so you know me talking about my parents, it isn't like some kind of reach for pity. My feelings are professionally diagnosed. My grandparents always felt like my parents. I still called them Grandma and Grandpa, but for all intents and purposes, they were my mom and dad. Until Grandpa died. It happened right after we moved into a new house in 2009. I didn't understand why we had to move back then. Grandpa kept blaming it on the president, but that didn't make any sense to me. Grandma kept on saying Grandpa lost his ass on our old house, which sounded painful but also didn't make sense because Grandpa still had his you-know-what. Obviously, I came to understand the Great Recession later on and how it forced a multitude of families out of their homes, but I'm trying to place you in my mindset back then. For some of this to make sense, you'll need to remember what it was like to be 7 years old. Where was I? Oh right, Grandpa. There isn't much to say other than he died in his sleep only days after we moved in. I'll never forget Grandma wailing loud enough to wake me up that morning. She told me and everyone else at Grandpa's funeral that her worst fear came true when she rolled over that morning and touched his cold, stiff arm. But I guess it was her second greatest fear, right after Mom coming back for me. So then it was just me and Grandma. I can't honestly say whether she ever had a job before she went to work at the Salvation Army up the street to supplement Grandpa's meager life insurance payouts. Next time you go to a Salvation Army, look into the cashier's eyes. I mean, really look. I know they're working for Jesus or whatever, but I swear to God that place sucks out people's souls. When Grandma would talk to friends about her job, she would always mention how great it was to work somewhere with a mission, but that's not what she talked about with me. I heard all about the lines of thankless bargain shoppers who treated her no better than one of the worthless trinkets on the shelves. None of them knew what Grandma had been through. When I visited her at work, I could tell some of the customers, usually the ones who didn't really need to shop at the Salvation Army, assumed she was there because she hadn't applied herself towards anything better. They had no idea she was trying to feed herself and her grandson on near minimum wage and a crappy insurance policy, or that she was doing it alone. And because of all this, I was alone too. If I didn't go visit Grandma at work, which I hated doing most of the time, I went straight home after school. I'd make myself some pizza rolls or toaster strudel and watch cartoons or read until Grandma came home after 7. And if that sounds like fun to you, I'm guessing you had parents. So there's everything you need to know for what's coming next to make sense, I hope. My therapist told me to write this story down to help me process it, so here we go. My fingers are sweating. I had this blue curtain on my bedroom window that, if shut during the afternoon, cast a tranquil aqua hue on the walls. I used to love shutting that curtain when I read fantasy novels. The otherworldly light helped me escape reality and enter the worlds in the books. I used to fantasize about discovering another world back then. I'm sure you can understand why. I wrote about this in a poem for school once, and my teacher recommended a book called The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I guess it's a classic. I checked it out from the school library and started reading it on the bus. I identified with the protagonists, the Pevensey siblings, having also been abandoned by my parents in the interest of saving my life. Up in my room with the blue curtain drawn, I read the part where Lucy, the youngest Pevensey, opens a wardrobe and discovers what else but a secret world. As I read about Lucy stepping into snowy Narnia, I could have sworn I heard a soft wind beating against the inside of my own closet door. I could imagine opening it, discovering a pine forest dusted in magical snow. Then, the wind behind the door beat a little harder. Hard enough to snap me out of my daydream. Setting the book down and rejecting its influence, I listened. I could not blame my imagination for the doors beating anymore. It was almost vibrating, rising in velocity, dropping down to a soft tapping, then rising again. I would love to tell you I was not so naive to think Narnia could actually be behind my closet door, but I was. My life preceding that moment matched the typical protagonist's journey in one of my fantasy books. There I'd been, an orphan hopelessly dreaming of a better, more exciting and fulfilling life, when a wise sage, my teacher, pointed me towards a sacred tome, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And now it was time to discover that, likely due to some sequel-worthy backstory, I was the chosen one. Chosen for what? Well, I would just have to open the closet door and find out. I dropped my feet onto the hardwood floor. I could feel a breeze between my toes, rushing towards me from under the door. Note to my therapist, this was a big moment for me because I had always been terrified of closets. I'm not sure why, maybe we can explore it in my next session, but for as long as I can remember, I'd had this horrible sense that something might be hiding behind every closet door. I realize now this is very common amongst children. Looking back, it's incredible that I went to the closet at all while it was making those noises, a testament to my desperation. With each step I took, what I was seeing, hearing, feeling, and even smelling, pine and whatever you call that cold, damp smell of snow, seemed more unbelievable, yet even more real. I could almost hear an epic score playing me towards the big reveal. When I reached the doorknob, I saw my hand trembling and realized a bit of my usual fear was present after all. I stood with my hand out like that, contemplating whether I really should open the door. I gazed back at the book lying on my bed, wondering if it contained answers. If I was going to open the door and enter some other world, I thought I should probably take the book with me. I turned back and took one step toward my bed. The door stopped shaking, and the breeze stopped whispering around my ankles. The world turned real again. I spun back around, hand outstretched, and ripped open the door, desperate to salvage my chance for adventure, fear be damned. But the closet was empty. I studied the walls and searched the ceiling. There was no way either had let in a draft, not one big enough to rattle the door anyway. But from nowhere, an icy gust burst past me, combing my hair, billowing my clothes, and drying my eyes. It only lasted a fraction of a second, but almost knocked me off my feet regardless. Nothing followed, but I would look back on this later as not the moment I entered another world, but that I let something into mine. I slammed the closet shut. Whenever I opened my blue curtain after having it closed for a while, it felt like waking up from a dream. I slid the curtain aside to transport myself out of the reality which had just been infiltrated. Unadulterated evening sun cleansed my room and comforted me. Still, when I picked my book up again, I carried it downstairs to keep reading it in the living room. Grandma came home and called to me from the kitchen. She wanted her sewing machine brought up from the basement. She had brought home an adult Halloween costume somebody had donated to the Salvation Army. It had a big tear under one of the arms, but it was in otherwise perfect condition. She could not bear to see it thrown away when she could so easily repair it. "It's torn through both layers, but I think I can manage it," she said. Want to guess what kind of costume it was? A lion. This was a total coincidence, happenstance, but sort of eerie too. Again, I could not help but feel linked to the book I'd just left in the living room. The lion costume did not try to be overly realistic, but it did have a fuzzy tail and a big bushy mane around the gaping hole for the wearer's face. Grandma kept her singer in the basement since she rarely used it anymore. When Grandpa was alive, she used to sit in front of that machine, often repairing clothes for him, for me, friends, and neighbors. I thought she didn't have the energy or time for sewing anymore, but knowing Grandma, she would have fixed anything a friend asked her to. I realized much later that her friends stopped asking for those little favors after Grandpa died. Little did they know, as much as Grandma loved sewing, a project here and there would have brought her joy that instead went missing. Excited that Grandma was sewing again, it always made her happier, I went to the basement. When I opened the door at the top of the stairs, though, I encountered an unexpected obstacle. The stairs were gone. The handrail and frame of the staircase still pointed the way down, but no steps existed to get me there. I returned to Grandma to ask if she knew the steps had all been removed, but she only scolded me for joking around instead of doing as she asked. She chastised me so that I doubted my own eyes and memory, and I returned to the basement ashamed. And there were the stairs, warped but sturdy as ever. Large gaps, spaces wide enough for a hand to reach through and grab your ankle, separated every step. Those gaps had terrified me during the few weeks we had lived in the house. Maybe they wouldn't have seemed so bad if I could have turned on the basement light from the top of the stairs, but the light bulb at the bottom turned on with a drawstring. I could only reach it if I stood on the last step and stretched. To get there, I had to brave the sinister staircase and whatever might lurk beneath it. Truth be told, as much as the stairs frightened me, I never hesitated at the top. I could usually mask my fear until about halfway down. And on the day Grandma sent me for her sewing machine to fix the lion costume, halfway down is where one step vanished again. My foot fell through the empty space before I caught myself on the handrail and yanked my foot back out. I can't recall what sort of sound I made, but it felt like my soul escaped through my mouth. Grandma yelled to check on me. I nearly yelled back, "Grandma, one of the stairs fell off," before I realized the trick my eyes and feet had played on me. The invisible step had returned once more. I tested it, gauged its strength, and shouted, "Sorry, just tripped." I had spooked myself, is what I decided. I was daydreaming about Narnia, and I'd begun to daymare about the basement steps. I stopped looking where I put my feet, refusing to acknowledge my nagging anxiety. My next step found solid footing, but then became stuck. A cramping pressure fixed it in place. It felt like a nail had caught my shoelace and spontaneously tightened it, only I was not wearing shoes. There was no wooden step beneath my foot. I had stepped into the palm of a wrinkled gray hand, the very sort my supposedly irrational fears had tried to warn me about. Its knotted fingers were responsible for the crushing sensation. A brittle-looking wrist connected the hand to a bony arm which disappeared under the step my other foot still stood upon. The hand tugged. The last two steps and the basement floor rushed up at me, but my fear wholly belonged to the monster dragging me below the stairs. Its movements were emphasized by awful groans and pops, like old barnwood protesting a storm. I think they came from the monster's bones. I screamed for Grandma while holding myself against the monster's pole with the handrail. Another gnarled hand rose through the stairs, snatching at my free ankle. It almost caught me. Where was Grandma? I kicked and connected with something like eggshells. Retribution came in a furious tug, which finally loosed my hands. I fell. My body crashed onto crusted paint cans, scattering them across the floor. I clenched my eyes shut as if I could make the monster disappear as I flailed amongst the cans, cobwebs, and dead insects. Uneven footsteps descended cautiously above me, and I heard Grandma shouting. She sounded so far away. I threw blind kicks as my hands searched for a weapon or purchase on anything which might stop me from being taken, from being dragged deeper into the shadows. The monster's wet mouth opened near my ear. Its sticky tongue squelched inches away. I flinched, and my eyes opened. 2 green, human-like eyes met them. Green eyes set in a gaunt face made of living stone. It bore a collapsed nose and a black void for a mouth gaping in an open frown. Black hair, oily and wet, framed this horrid expression. Shadows disguised any further details, but just as through tears I focused on my attacker, it started losing opacity. Like a cloud breaking apart, it drifted into the ether. Its grip on my ankle remained tight until the last of its faint edges vanished. Grandma found me, a heap of vibrating muscles lubricated by tears and snot. She demanded to know what I was doing beneath the stairs. "You could have spilled one of these cans all over the floor, you know," she scolded me. "What happened?" I took her hand and let her pull me out from under the staircase. By the way, not one step was missing, which made it difficult to instill any credibility into the story I proceeded to tell her. Even to me, it sounded like the rampant delusions of an overworked imagination. I carried the sewing machine upstairs once I got a handle on myself. I didn't want to, but I realized I would be back in the basement again soon if I didn't. Grandma watched me from the corners of her eyes for the rest of the night. It would not be until later that night, when I rolled my sock off of my foot, that I would discover 4 long bruises wrapping all the way around it. If nothing else, those were certainly real. There's a certain age when, although you are told ghosts and monsters aren't real, you need assurances. You start to notice inconsistencies. You're told drinking soda will rot your teeth, but there are garbage bags bursting with empty Mountain Dew cans in your friend's garage, and his parents have all their pearly whites. You're told by some relative who smokes a pack a day that you should never pick up the habit, but if smoking is so terrible, why does it seem they can't wait for the chance to do it? You're told ghosts and monsters and werewolves and vampires aren't real. Then a green-eyed basement dweller pulls you under the stairs. The next morning, a Saturday, Grandma was off work. I came downstairs while she was making breakfast and asked, "Grandma, do you believe in ghosts?" "Of course not, Carter. Why would you ask such a silly question?" Grandma predictably answered. I swallowed my nerves and said, "Because I think I saw one yesterday, in the basement." Grandma said, "Well, I'm pretty sure you didn't." I doubled down. "I think it came out of my closet." Grandma replied, "Every kid thinks there's a monster in their closet. Someday you'll grow up and realize that sort of thing is just silly. Besides, the only real monsters are lawyers and congressmen." I didn't know what those were, but I was pretty sure a congressman hadn't pulled me through the staircase. "But Grandma," I was about to show her the bruise on my foot even though they had already faded significantly, but she interrupted me. "You've been reading too many of those books about magic and dragons. You're losing touch with reality." Losing touch with reality. See, and here I thought reality was losing touch with itself. Grandma's hard-nosed disposition seemed unhelpful in the moment, but it actually went a long way in comforting me. Hearing how easily she dismissed my claim made me wonder if she was right, which opened the door to the possibility that everything was actually okay. And that was enough to get me through the day. Mostly. Sometimes Grandma would make a noise downstairs, and I would jump and glance at the closet. But mostly, I felt safe. I don't think the monster liked my new confidence much, so it went after my source of comfort. Grandma opened my door that evening, right before bed, hands shaking. I thought she had just received some bad news, or maybe she was sick. She did look a little feverish. Without looking at me, she closed the door behind her, then pointed to my closet and asked, "Did you really mean what you said about something coming out of there?" I had to think. She and I had both put so much effort into convincing me nothing had happened that turning around and believing it again took some effort. I said, "Yeah, I guess I did." "You guess?" she demanded. Then, "But you've never been one to make up stories, have you?" "Do you believe me?" I asked. She opened my door again and gestured for me to follow her. We went downstairs to the kitchen. The table was a mess. Grandma always spread her materials out across the whole table when tackling a sewing project, but never with such total disregard. She led me all the way outside into the driveway. On the way out the door, I asked what we were doing, and Grandma answered, "I have to keep an eye on this." A nasty-smelling smoke wafted over the driveway from the side of the house. It irritated my eyes and made my nose run clear and watery. Grandma said, "I might have been wrong about what I said earlier. You know, about..." She couldn't make herself say ghosts, but I didn't hold it against her. I had never heard her apologize before, and she was trying her best. She finished, "But don't worry, I think I took care of it." The wind breathed a particularly pungent cloud of smoke toward us. I coughed. Grandma moved us further up the driveway. From there, I could see around the side of the house and found the source of the smoke. Grandpa's old charcoal grill was on fire. Or at least, that's how it looked. I noticed the fuzzy tail of the lion costume dangling from the open top and asked, "Why did you burn the costume?" Grandma ignored the question. "I want you to stay out here until we can go back inside together. Then I want you to tell me if you see anything strange again, or if anything weird happens. You tell me right away, you hear?" I nodded and tried to ask about the lion costume again, but the flames suddenly tripled. Grandma swore and shuffled toward the grill. I couldn't follow her through the smoke. I heard her coughing, then a loud hiss. The smoke turned white, and the smell changed to something like a dusty attic. Grandma stood a few feet from the grill holding a fire extinguisher. The charred lion costume, now covered in thin foam, slumped to the ground. After dumping the costume's remains in the trash bin, Grandma went straight up to her room and shut herself in. I went around checking locks on doors and windows. All were secure, but I still feared our infiltrator might find another way in. I was smart enough to put together how Grandma thought it was connected to the lion costume, and by burning the costume, she had ended the haunting. I wanted her to be right, but I feared she was not. I lay alone in bed, wanting to read, but scared of what might come out of the book next. It had not occurred to me, and would not for many years, that whatever had come into our house was masking itself with whatever occupied mine and Grandma's minds. It was inserting itself at the top of our awareness and twisting those things which brought us joy. It was leeching us. I think it wanted us weak. Sleep tugged at my eyelids. My thoughts ran together in an incoherent mush that I was no longer paying any attention to. My mind was nearly blank when I heard a thud above me. I stared at the ceiling until I heard the next thump, clearly from the roof. It didn't come from the attic. I knew because of how soft it sounded. Soft, but heavy. When I heard this second thump, I pulled my covers over my head. I wondered if Grandma could hear the sounds too. They began pacing above me, like someone walking in circles. For what purpose, I could not venture to guess. After 7 or 8 rounds, the footsteps stopped. A few seconds passed, then both feet, if that's what they were, jumped, landing together. Everything went quiet. My uneven breathing sounded twice as loud beneath my covers, making me hold my breath out of fear I would miss a crucial sound outside. Whatever was out there jumped again, but this time its feet did land in the attic above as if it had fallen through the roof. My ceiling groaned. I started calculating how quickly I could run to my door, to Grandma's room. The next thud boomed before I made a decision. It came from right beside my bed and sounded like my bare feet when I jumped out of bed every morning. It was there, right next to me. Did it know I was there too? Did it know I was hiding under the covers? I'd been holding my breath too long. Soon I would have to release it, and then the monster would know where to find me. It was so still, so quiet. I silently begged for it to make the floor creak or for some sound which would disguise a whispering breath. But the phantom beside my bed made no such sound, and I had to breathe. I intended for my lips to form a tiny spigot, but the desperate air inside me forced them open. Immediately, my covers flew off. They hit the far wall in a cluster. I did not look to see what had thrown them, instead rolling off of the bed on the side opposite the intruder. My bed springs croaked like someone was crawling across the mattress. Too afraid to stand lest I be snatched up, I flattened myself and slipped under the bed. I wanted to scream for Grandma, but had again fooled myself into thinking silence would protect me. I could hear every movement from the being above me. Bed springs squealed, the box spring groaned, and I thought the slats 2 inches above me might split. Whatever was up there must have been 3 or 4 times heavier than me. For a second, my primary fear changed from being caught to being crushed. I heard one of the slats near my feet break from the frame. It fell diagonally across my legs, and still the weight above increased. When it seemed inevitable the whole bed would come down on me, the intruder jumped. When it landed on the bed again, another slat snapped in the middle, prodding my chest and forcing me to move close to the edge. It must have been encouraged by the snapping board, because the intruder jumped again and again and again. Each time the whole bed frame shook. The legs slid 4 inches during all of this. Finally, I could no longer stand the anticipation of the final blow. I cried, "Stop!" and regret instantly wrenched my stomach. I tried to curl into a ball, but I didn't have enough room to move. My protest worked, though. A gust of ethereal wind opened my bedroom door and signaled my salvation from present danger, but also the beginning of a new set of horrors. No more sounds came from my bedroom, but down the hall, I heard Grandma scream my name. Terrified of what I would find, but eager to be out from under the bed and the restrictions it imposed, I worked my way out and scampered to the doorway, peering into the dark hallway, seeing nothing, hearing nothing. Grandma only screamed my name once. Had she meant for me to go to her or to run away? To aid or escape? I knew which one I wanted to do, but I wouldn't have been able to live with myself after abandoning my only family, the only person who remained sober and alive enough to take care of me. I don't believe Grandma was telling me to come or run away, because when I did finally go to her, she looked angry. Beyond any doubt, the most furious I ever saw her, right up to the day she passed away as the only person I shared that harrowing night with. When she saw me, she was already red and turned purple. The glow of her bedside lamp, which she stood beside wearing only a nightgown, cast ugly shadows on her scowling face. "Carter James," she growled, "is this your idea of a joke? Has it been you scaring me this whole time?" I hurried to explain, "No, something just left my room. I was hiding under my bed the whole time." She yelled, almost as loudly as she had first screamed my name, "This stops right now. Tell me the truth, or—" A boom like a shotgun shook the floor. This one came from downstairs. Grandma and I stared at each other, paralyzed with fright. I'm not sure words can convey the evil feeling which bled into the air, rising from downstairs like invisible smoke. It was similarly suffocating and tasted just as toxic. "It's still here," I said, knowing she would understand what I meant. Although she still hadn't told me what happened to her earlier that day with the costume, I had a feeling she might believe in monsters now. "We need to leave," she said. Not necessarily to me. But where could we go? There wasn't an exit upstairs unless you counted the windows, all of which led out to a 2-story drop that I may have been able to endure with little injury, but would at the very least hobble Grandma. And that's assuming she could make it through a window. We ran out of time to decide what to do. Another sound came from below. This time, the distinctive croak of the first stair. I imagined a foot, an elongated version of the hand which had grabbed me in the basement, pressing down on that step. I'm not sure why, because neither Grandma nor I had seen the monster yet that night. It felt more present, I guess. It felt inevitable. And it smelled now, adding to its amplified presence. It smelled like smoke and, strangely, a bit like barbecue. It also had a toxic undertone which forced the memory of Grandma burning the lion costume upon me. By now, the footsteps were halfway up the stairs. They came in an uneven pattern which did not synchronize with my intrinsic memory of how the stairs should sound. It almost sounded like 2 separate intruders creeping up. "Carter," Grandma whispered, "close the door." This obvious reaction had eluded me while I tried to make sense of what I was hearing. I reached for the door at the very moment a tarnished mane emerged at the top of the stairs. I watched, it was all I could do, as the charred and in some places melted lion suit padded into the hallway on all 4s. It was clearly operated by something physical within. The hood pointed down so the blackened mane hid the wearer's face, but I imagined it would mirror the one I had seen prior, the one with the green eyes. Without shutting the door, lest I alert the downward-facing lion of our location, I scurried back to Grandma. She shut off her lamp, and we knelt behind her bed. Grandma had all sorts of boxes and shoes and things under her bed, so I couldn't hide there this time. Luckily, Grandma's vanity mirror faced the open doorway, so I thought I could watch the lion. Unfortunately, I realized, if I could see the lion in the mirror, it could also see me. I cowered away from the reflection. A board popped in the hallway. Another squeaked. If I tried hard, I could make out the sound of the fuzzy tail dragging. I heard the mane brushing against the bedroom door and risked a glance at the mirror, hoping the lion wouldn't choose that moment to look up. Hope meant nothing to the vile spirit which had possessed the costume. Our eyes met in the reflection. It smiled. "Grandma," I shouted as I scrambled to my feet. She climbed up using the bed and gasped when she saw the lion's face. The lion stalked back and forth, much like a real cat, pacing to show us our boundary. With walls behind and to either side of us, we had nowhere to go. It fed off our fear, and it must have been getting full. Grandma and I were both the most terrified of our lives. "Get back!" Grandma screamed. She picked up the lamp, wielding it defensively. The lion pounced onto the bed. Grandma turned the lamp on. "You can't take him! You can't!" Grandma cried angrily, waving the lamp back and forth like a torch. The lion came forward, moving fully into the light, and I saw its face in perfect detail. A few locks of black hair had loosed from the hood, framing the face and putting it in context for me. It was gray and hollow and dead-looking, but it was without a doubt the face of my mother. She sensed my recognition. "No, don't you look at him," Grandma warned. "Look at yourself. What judge would ever give you custody? What's your plan? Kidnapping him?" The thing wearing Mom's face looked back at Grandma and grinned. Pink coloration spread from behind its ears and washed over the whole face. The nose inflated and straightened. Its thin, dry lips puffed out and healed, then darkened. Beautiful eyebrows grew in above its eyes, which came out of the skull until they looked youthful and alert. The face now looked like a photo I had seen of my mother in high school, right before she was introduced to hard drugs. If I needed any confirmation the thing in the lion suit was not actually my mother, that was it. Even if she was still alive, that version of her was long dead. The spirit had tapped into Grandma's worst fear, though, and it had a piercing grip on her. "Go away!" I shouted at it, but it remained focused on Grandma. Its face was beautiful, but its expression hideous. Its grin had become a sneer, its repaired nose scrunched, and in its eyes, I saw something I had never seen before, yet instantly recognized. Bloodlust. The lion hunched back and pounced at Grandma. She threw the lamp with both arms directly into the lion's face, my mother's face. The lamp entered the costume's hood, still actively pursuing its trajectory. The whole costume went limp as the lamp dragged it off of the bed, through the air, and onto the floor across from us, where the lamp shattered and the costume went still. "Let's go, Carter," Grandma said. She ushered me away from the bed and we hurried downstairs. On the way out the door, she grabbed her car keys. She drove us to the Salvation Army, and we slept on donated couches. Or tried to sleep anyway. We let the bank foreclose on that house. We never went back. Whether that dark spirit had been patiently awaiting its chance in that house when we moved in, or if it actually came with the costume, we weren't going to risk facing it again. Grandma had to buy a new copy of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe for the school library. I've chosen to remain ignorant about the house's fate. I'm not sure if it still stands, or if it does, who owns it. I fear, see how the emotion continues to drive me, that reestablishing any sort of connection to the house, even just seeing a picture of it, might invite the terrible thing back into my life. And now I don't have Grandma to protect me. She passed away unexpectedly in her sleep. At her funeral, the minister said she passed away peacefully. I hope he's right, but I'm not so sure. The reason I wonder ties back to why Grandma tried to burn up that lion costume. She told me her theory about what happened years after our ordeal. "It knew I was afraid to lose your grandpa, and that I knew his heart wasn't in the greatest shape. Somehow, it killed him. It took him away because that's what I was the most afraid of. It must have lived off of the daily fears I had about not being able to support you or losing you until it was strong enough to try to take you too." I could see it her way if I tried. I had not been the intended victim of the haunting as I had previously believed. I was merely a pawn in a scheme to, what, hurt Grandma? But I believed her based on what made her burn the costume. While she was repairing the outer lining, she said she began to feel the fabric tightening. She realized it was moving slightly beneath her fingertips. She sat back and watched as the costume inflated, but only partially. She said the legs only firmed up about halfway down. A face had appeared in the open hole. Grandma recoiled. The face, bluish-gray and morbidly still, belonged to me. It was my face, encased in the stillness of death. You made it out. Congratulations. If you enjoyed the story, please rate, like, review, or subscribe. For ad-free episodes and bonus Into the Woods episodes, become a patron with the link in the description. You can also support the show by buying merch. That link is also in the description below. To stay up to date, follow me on Instagram at The Warning Woods. If you feel ready, meet me here next week for another journey into the Warning Woods. Thank you for listening.